Hello and welcome again to CTRL+F, the NSI Cyber and Tech Centers podcast. This season, we're bringing you a series of sessions from one of the nation's leading cyber events, the National Cyber Innovation Forum. My name is Andrew McClure, the president of the National Cyber Innovation Forum. This episode, we dive into part one of a conversation with senior fellow at the Center for European Policy Analysis, Laura Galante, the Director of Security and Intelligence with the State of New York, Colin Ahern, the Head of Cyber and National Security Policy at Anthropic, Bair, the President of Schellman, Barbin, and the President of Forescout Government Systems, Walsh. Stay tuned for a conversation about how organizations are securing critical infrastructure, governing frontier AI, strengthening assurance, improving visibility across cyber physical environments to build resilience and maintain trust in an era of persistent cyber threats. These leaders will discuss priorities for organizations keeping pace with innovation.
All right, for our next panel, thank you everybody for the next panel. It's the Security Leaders Roundtable. So we got Colin Ahern, Bair, Barbin, Walsh joining us. So please start walking out on stage. Colin is the Director of Security and Intelligence for the State of New York, appointed by Governor Walsh in February of this year to act as the first Director of Security and Intelligence. And he was the first ever state's Chief Cyber Officer. Bair, beyond being a Forge Point fellow at one point, is the Head of Cyber and National Security Policy at Anthropic. He was the CISO for Americas at Zscaler, Executive Director at Team Comrie, and spent 20 years in the U.S. Navy as a cyber operator. Doug Barbin is President at Schellman, a compliance company. And Walsh is President at Forescout, where he leads the company's business across civilian, defense, and intelligence agencies. Panel moderated by Laura Galante, the Senior Fellow at the Center for European Policy Analysis, and also an executive at West Exec. So Laura, please take it from here.
Thank you. Thank you, Andrew. So we're leading the first tableless roundtable here today. Great crew. I'm actually going to start down at the end here with Colin, who's joining us from New York and has another engagement on the Hill today, too. So this is his warm-up act. Colin, I want to start a little bit with your title. You're the Director of Security and Intelligence for the State of New York. And I'm fully biased coming from the intelligence side of the house here in the federal government, but you're probably the first person at the state level to have intelligence at your title, and you've got a governor who's really empowered that and given this role its first shape. I would be curious how you're thinking about how cybersecurity, cyber operations, and intelligence are getting coordinated across the state level. How are you using that in emergency preparedness, in the cyber physical problem? I know we just talked OT up on stage, but how are you using that dual hat of security intelligence at the state level?
Thanks. Firstly, it's great to be back at the forum. Always a pleasure. Thanks to everybody. Great to see such a good crowd and so many familiar faces. And I think there's no secret that the threats are converging. We're seeing cyber and physical threats converge. We're seeing hybrid threats. We're seeing misdis and malinformation combined with incipient and dangerous acts of self-radicalized terror. We're seeing enablement across the operational spectrum from cyber into physical. And we need to make sure that the governor and her senior leadership team has the right information at the right time to make the right decision against the right problems. And this is a discipline in which decision advantage, really the heart and soul of the intelligence cycle, is one in which we're fortunate to have a lot of resources in New York State stemming back, from the first counterterrorism task force in the 70s, formed in New York, all the way to New York is one of the few states with two federally chartered cyber threat intelligence, counterintelligence, and cyber fusion centers, one in New York City, one outside of Albany. So New York State has always been a place that has really leaned forward in intelligence. And with the convergence of cyber and other hybrid threats, the governor really wanted someone to enable and coordinate and really to make these other disciplines more successful by ensuring that her leadership team is making good decisions with good information. And that is actually with the explosion in information and tools both on the one hand, easier to do but less straightforward. So making sure that we're separating the wheat from the chaff is, I think, a continual challenge for all leaders at all levels. But the governor's showing with the way she has formed her leadership team that intelligence-driven operations, both for cyber defense, but also countering foreign malign influence, other things are important.
It's a great construct, and thanks for laying that down. If we can get into kind of the operational experience that you work with for a second here, though. You've got small town in the Catskills, and then you've got globally significant institutions, to put it mildly, in Manhattan, and everything in between. And you've got the hat for defending a lot of this and coordinating the action around it.
Yeah.
How do you think about scale, and how do you think about the people side of the security issues that you're working with and the different audiences that you have to hit just in one state?
Yeah, I think, and apologies if you heard this anecdote before, it has to work for Ed. So Ed is an actual person. He's in a place called the North Country, which is near the border with Canada. And he's a county deputy executive. That means that he helps run a county, right? You know, so like a big place by land area. But he also has two other jobs, right? He's also the local exterminator, and he also runs IT, right? So he has a full-time job and two part-time jobs. So what we do, we have one of the most sophisticated state-level cyber operations center. It has 60 civil servants and 6 National Guards persons that operate 24/7, 365. We have shared services. We cover 100,000 government computers in 55 counties, 34 cities, villages, and towns, and dozens of police stations, including Ed's County, including the sheriff's office in Ed's County. But our shared services are, more like a sandwich than a puppy. Right? And so they have to work for someone who is not just busy, but busy doesn't even cover the kind of things that Ed has going on. So sending Ed a PDF is probably not going to work, right? It needs to be something that Ed can double click. And so our perspective is we can provide nonlinear returns to scale through the government's purchasing power, through our civil service cadre, we have tools that can make Ed more successful, and we need to employ them in a way that is easy for Ed to consume. And so I think that's one of our perspectives.
Yeah, great. All right, I'm going to come back and ask you at the end here to give us a preview on what you're advocating for down here today. But first I want to go to Bair from Anthropic. You're the head of cyber and national security policy. No big deal, very quiet, couple of weeks here, I'm sure in your world. All of that aside, I think the big question that a lot of folks in this room, from the OEM side, from the vendor side, from the secure technology standpoint, are saying, hey, why am I not in Glasswing? That's kind of the quiet part out loud. In addition to a lot of the questions around what Mythos means for clients, what it means for the market, and more. So maybe just give us your start on, straight from the horse's mouth. Tell us a little bit around how you've conceived a Glasswing. Where do you see this going? And then on the other side, what does Mythos really look like, and what are your approaches to how you secure and how you make this safer?
What's Glasswing and Mythos? Since April 7th, when we released Mythos Preview to a couple of dozen companies, also donating $100 million in tokens and $4 million to the Open Source Security Center. The pace at which we are finding vulnerabilities and now able to patch them across critical systems has changed forever. And so when we started testing Mythos internally, and as a consequence of being really, really good at software engineering and coding, it is also really good at finding these vulnerabilities and chaining together exploits to go after them. So we did not release Mythos publicly. We chose to not release it because we wanted to get it into the hands of defenders first, to give those who provide critical software and services the opportunity to find those vulnerabilities and patch them before similar capabilities. And we believe, as a Frontier Lab, that other Frontier Labs will either develop these capabilities in the coming months, or models will be distilled by potentially adversarial countries, which will then be put into open source models, which will then get into the hands of hackers and those who chose to do us harm. We needed to find software that was going to affect millions and millions of Americans, and we needed to allow those vendors and open source maintainers to go through that code base and patch it before that distillation happens, before it gets into the hands of an adversary. The other thing is, Anthropic is a very safety-conscious lab, and we wanted to make sure that we had the right safeguards, classifiers, probes, KYC, and other programs in place to ensure that those who are getting Mythos level-like capabilities are abiding by our terms of use, using the tool responsibly. We don't look at security and safeguards as a cost center. It's just the way of doing business at Anthropic. And so we're building safety and security into every model. And, and we'll see what Glasswing Wave 2 may look like.
Great. Anthropic's been very open. Last fall came out and we talked about some of the distillation attacks and talked about Chinese back after getting into what you have. I'd be curious how you're thinking about that sort of disclosure internally in Anthropic. I think there's a lot of folks here who are thinking about how they do disclosure with their own products and the vulnerabilities that they're going to find. How is Anthropic thinking about it?
Yeah, I think two things. One is speed, right? So we had this previous 90-day reporting window, which was moving almost at human speed. I think as a frontier lab with a capability like Mythos, we're now rethinking whether 90 days is actually fast enough for reporting because, the known exploitable vulnerability catalog, the CVEs, JCDC is going to be stress tested, and is 90 days fast enough to get this reporting requirement out? I think the second thing is we strongly believe that we need to work with industry, with other labs, and with the US government to do responsible disclosure at speed. And you brought up the Chinese misuse of Anthropic's models to go after both private and public sector organizations. We call that GTG 1002 internally. We talked about it publicly because we wanted to make the public know that nation states are employing these capabilities. It's really important to know that we detected it, we disrupted it, but we talked about it, and we're going to continue to talk about these things with government and private sector.
All right, one last follow-up on this. There's been a lot of discussion on how your model, so you've talked about it, can be used for malicious purposes, to put it mildly. But what about when you're using a couple different models together, right? And on the white hat side of this, there's a lot of people coding and saying, hey, is Claude working this way? What's going on, with chat? What do they think of this? And it's sort of jumping between models to get best outcomes. Obviously, early adopters are adversaries too. So what do you have in place and what's your thought process with the other frontier labs on how multi-model malicious activity is going to take place?
Yeah, model chaining is definitely a concern for all the frontier labs, and we're collaborating with the other labs to put safeguards and classifiers in place to prevent this from happening. But this goes back to, again, the thinking about not making Mythos GA, because we all, as frontier labs, need to make sure that we have probes and classifiers that are robust enough in place to detect things and those who are trying to jailbreak the models and chain them together. What is going to be really, really challenging is the distillation problem that you brought up, right? If a certain lab in a certain country gets access to these models, they then open source it, you chain the models together. Now we have to ensure that Mythos-like capabilities are in the hands of defenders so we can close those vulnerabilities before that happens.
Great. All right, I'll be back with some more questions in a minute, but appreciate this. Okay, we're next going to move over to Doug Barbin, who's the president at Schellman. I'm going to shorthand Schellman as cybersecurity compliance audit, the grading rubric behind a lot of organizations' cybersecurity profile. I was recently sitting in a board meeting, public company, and the CISO had his moment at the quarterly meeting. And he came up and he said, we've got 90 AI pilots going in our company. And I think he thought this was going to be a resonating success to say, look how innovative we are, look at what we're up to, just data point board, here's how we're using this. And I'll tell you the reaction in the room was some version of, antennas went up, heads exploded, and it was sort of like, how do we get this governed? How do we get risk under control? And I think a version of that conversation is happening left and right. Board level, executive level, CISO level, and more. I'd be curious from what you're seeing with your clients who are focused on how do I get my hands around this from an audit, compliance, governance standpoint. What are they now asking you for that they weren't before, and where do you see questions around this sort of assurance going?
Appreciate the question. Also appreciate getting to go after glass wing as an auditor. So, in all seriousness, that's a great question. That's a question that a lot of boards and management teams are getting. The first question I would ask is 90 the right number, right? And that's what they know about, and that's a continuing issue that we see. Whether it's 90 or 20, it's not how many are you running, it's how many do you know about that you're running, and how many do you know about that you've authorized, that you put through risk treatment, and so forth as well. And so I say that from the perspective, it's not just, shadow AI as a buzz term, right? It's not just individuals running software on their laptops or what have you that they think is doing better for their job, but potentially disclosing sensitive information, but it's also the embedded AI models within SaaS applications, within commercial products that you might not have even evaluated to know that there are AI models, and connectivity to other models and so forth as well that are running. So it is good that the board generated, the number probably generated some interest. I think there are, that number in most instances is understated, and I think the next level of conversation for that CISO is to articulate, well, what are we doing? What is our onboarding program? What is our process? There's a variety of frameworks that you can adopt and follow, but that it's trust and safety, right? We talked about this a little bit more. It's less of a compliance checkbox world anymore, and it's around trust and safety in the new perimeter that we're dealing with.
That's a wrap for today's episode. Thanks to Hannah Haynes, Keelan Wolf, Claude Jennings, and the entire NSI CTC team in helping us produce today's episode. Be on the lookout every Monday and Wednesday for more sessions from the National Cyber Innovation Forum. If you like what you heard, be sure to rate, review, and subscribe. Thanks again.